My name is James Carrion. I'm the International Director of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. I've been involved in UFO studies and research off and on for a number of years, since age 11. What actually got me interested in the subject, believe it or not, was my mother. She subscribed to all the tabloid publications at the time. So I had a little hobby of clipping out the front page articles of the National Enquirer and the Star and the Globe on aliens and UFOs. So that really piqued my interest. When I got out of the military, I went to school at Florida State University. That's when I first heard about MUFON. It was actually in relation to a strange story that broke in the news about some young soldiers that went AWOL from their base in Augsburg, Germany. And they had traveled to Florida because they wanted to attend a MUFON conference there. And something to do with UFOs, and they were interested. A book was written about their experience. But it wasn't until I moved to Colorado in 1996 that I actually joined MUFON, one of the MUFON state chapters, and worked my way up through the ranks. Eventually got on the board of directors for MUFON, and then I took over as the international director in 2006 when John Schuessler retired. MUFON receives on average 400 to 600 reports a month. And of those, I would say probably 90% are your typical light in the sky, something flying overhead, nothing close up. But it's that 10% where folks are seeing structured craft within 500 feet, landings that involve trace evidence, abductions, entities being seen on the ground. We're getting a number of those reports still coming in. And so those are our high category reports. We'd like to get folks out there quickly to investigate the higher category sightings. It's been interesting to be in this position as the international director because not only am I seeing this is sort of the focal point for everything happening in the UFO world, and we get reports from everybody. We get photographs from folks from all over the world. And we also see quite a bit of government involvement in the field. And it seems to be a pretty high interest still on the part of some elements in government into what MUFON's doing. And we're still trying to figure that part out. MUFON has been around since 1969. In fact, MUFON was founded the same year that the Condon Committee released their report on UFOs and when Project Blue Book was terminated. So basically, we stepped in as a civilian organization to take over where the Air Force left off. And we're pretty proud of that. And we actually have a T-shirt that on the back says, doing the Air Force's job since 1969, because pretty much that's what we've been doing. So we weren't around in 47. Actually, there were no UFO organizations in 47. NICAP didn't start up until the 50s. But going back to Roswell is a pretty interesting event. And 1947 is a very interesting year. Going back to the very first UFO sighting that made the international news, Kenneth Arnold, June 24th, 1947, to a couple weeks later, all of a sudden we have a crashed UFO in New Mexico. But what my research is showing early on is that the early sightings of UFOs and the early involvement of government agencies in UFOs in 1947 may actually have been triggered by something that has nothing to do with extraterrestrial visitation. What my research is showing is that government interests in that time had more to do with the national security, for national security reasons, more of a counterintelligence program. And most people don't know this. 2 weeks prior to Kenneth Arnold's sighting on June 24th, there was an international story that broke the news where somehow what was leaked to the press was there was a top secret research program that outrivaled the atomic bomb, something that we were experimenting with that was bigger than the A-bomb. I think Roswell is actually part of that operation. Roswell has always troubled me, primarily because we have the 509th Bomber Group. These were top men of just hand-picked men who were picked for their competence, for their intelligence, and especially for their ability to keep their mouths shut. I mean, these were the folks that participated not only in the dropping of the bomb in Japan, but also participated in Operation Crossroads when we were dropping or testing more nuclear weapons in Bikini Atoll. So what never made any sense to me about Roswell was why, if we had found something that was not ours, let's say a crashed extraterrestrial craft, why would anybody in their right mind put out a press release on that? That doesn't make any sense. I can understand if it was the local Air National Guard unit that found it and they blabbed, but not the 509th Bomber Group. It simply doesn't make any sense. What we have a problem with is sifting the chaff from the wheat. We know the government, for example, uses UFOs as cover for their own exotic aircraft. So what they're flying out of Area 51, the latest model of stealth bomber. For example, all of these triangular craft we're seeing pop up all over the United States appear to me to be a military craft. So again, here we have the government's involvement that muddies the water and makes it extremely difficult for us to know what is ours and what is theirs. And I've said this for a long time, unless we can unequivocally know what the role of government is in this field, we will simply not get to the truth. Well, the Phoenix Lights, I think, obviously was witnessed by hundreds of individuals. Video was taken. There were early reports of a large craft coming over. So again, I'm not sure. It's one of those strange events where we don't know whether that was ours or someone else's. I do find it interesting that when the public interest in UFOs wanes, all of a sudden there's a major report that shows up. For example, if you look back in 2006 when I took over, the media was not at all interested in the subject, and then boom, Chicago O'Hare hits, and media interest goes back up, and then it wanes, and Stephenville hits. So it always seems like when there's a lull in activity, something major happens. Again, we don't know why, and we don't know whether these objects are from somewhere else or they're part of some plan to keep us interested. Well, I think if we look at the spectrum of belief about UFOs, the spectrum of belief runs from the true believer on one end to the true debunker on the other end. And what the believer and the debunker have in common is their minds are already made up. The believer knows they're from outside, they're coming here, what their purpose is. The debunkers think everything's prosaic, this is a bunch of craziness, and they don't bother to look at the evidence. MUFON would like to find itself in the middle. We'd like to consider ourselves open-minded but skeptical investigators, and we hope that all of the folks who join our ranks and become investigators will adhere to those standards. When we talk about government cover-up, I think it's important to put it in perspective. We're not talking about a massive operation. I like to because disinformation is used so effectively. My favorite saying is disinformation is like garlic. A little bit goes a long way. And I think that with the right placement of information and the handling and the management of information, you can make folks believe that there's a larger cover-up going on, when in fact it's probably very small. I have a background in military intelligence. I spent 4 years in the Army as a Russian linguist and as a signals intelligence analyst. One of the great things they taught us in signals intelligence school is really how to separate the signal from the noise. Now, keep in mind that we were intercept operators, so we were listening in on the Russians during the Cold War, and we got lots of traffic, so it was important for us to know what was important data and what was not important. And I think the same thing applies to the UFO field. With so much information coming in, both directly to MUFON or indirectly through the internet, there's this huge body of data, and you have to be able to categorize it, and you have to be able to sift through it and know what's important and what's not. And then really those cases that shuffle to the top are the ones you need to get your investigators out there and deployed on.